Today on The Perspective with Mike Sherbino and Julie Stautland. Well, it's said that comedians are notoriously tortured inside. Arguably, they reflect ourselves and our culture back to us. Jay Martin, though, is a comedian of a different vein. He delivers clean humor. Today, the radio show host and comic talks with Mike and Julie all things cancel culture, the slap heard around the world, and how clean comedy became his calling. And speaking of a love of comedy and late-night talk shows, here's Mike and Julie.
Well, we're really glad you're with us today on the program. As usual, Julie, we always like to do something a little funny and just maybe not trying to be funny, just talk about the funny side of life. It helps to lift the load. But sometimes humor can go a little too far.
Sometimes it can.
Yeah, and trying to know what is the balance. And so we have an amazing comedian.
We do.
Jay is with us again today, and I'm looking forward to that so much. But in the midst of that, he's going to help us to unpack a difficult subject, cancel culture. And cancel culture means different things to different people.
It's a hard one.
It's a hard one, but you know what? It's canceling. If you don't know what it is, it's what it is. It's performed on social media a lot today in the whole form of group shaming. And to be canceled actually means that a person or group decides to stop supporting someone or something based on a transgression that is either actual or perceived. And if you get canceled, I mean, you're gone, you're done, and it's really hard to recover. So the other thing I want to talk about at the end, Julie, is there hope? If you've been canceled, can you recover?
Is there a way back?
And what does the Bible have to say about it? So we're going to look at those things together.
All right.
So stay with us today. Jay Martin's coming up right next. You're going to smile, and you're going to have lots to think about. Well, if you've watched any of our programs, you know that I like to laugh. I like to crack a joke. But the person who has me beat hands down is Jay Martin. He's a multifaceted talent in the city of Toronto. They've compared him to Steve Harvey. They didn't do that with me. And he has built a reputation in the city for bringing audiences to laugh. And I am just glad that Jay is back with us. Jay, thanks for joining us today. We're so glad you're with us. And
good to see you.
Yeah, listen, I got a bone to pick with you. You know, since we talked a long time ago, I thought you were going to invite me to come and do the opening part of your next act. I didn't get a phone call. I didn't get a text. I got zilch. What's with that?
Can I tell you why? Because today, in today's world, it's pretty dangerous. My insurance doesn't go extend it upon people coming on stage, and you stepping on stage, I don't know what's going to happen. So I actually did you a favor.
There you go.
I think that's a cop-out. I mean, we could have done better than that. But, you know, just tell us a little bit about yourself and refresh our audience's mind, because humor became such a pivotal part in your life when you were going through a lot of pain. Is that not true?
That's so true. It's so true, Mike. I'm telling you, growing up, I lost my brother at an early age of 12, and then my mother at the age of 16. And sadly enough, her funeral was the same day as my 16th birthday. So there was a lot of struggle to dealing with a lot of the depression I went through. And there was none of my friends or anyone of my classmates that was going through that. So I didn't have anyone in a sense of direction to look to for guidance. Thank God I had my church members that were there praying for me, but that pain, I just couldn't find a way to relieve it. And when people lose people close to them, it brings out a big gaping hole. And the first thing your instincts tells you to do is try to fill this hole. But this hole is like a Grand Canyon. And the more you throw things into the hole, the bigger the hole seems to get. So I used another way because people felt uncomfortable around me, because that's the guy who lost his brother and mother. That's the guy that's coming from a single family home. Will he be an orphan? What happens? And I just kind of hit that with comedy. So it's not even that, I went out looking for comedy. Comedy found me in the greatest place. So I started telling jokes at school and being around people and making them laugh. Didn't even think it was something you could do for a living until way later in my life. but it was definitely the pinnacle point in my life that made people feel a lot better about themselves. And that just took off, and the experience don't stop. They never end. I just started telling jokes in church and found that God had a sense of humor and religion had a place in there. And I just would describe things like, example, my mom going into church, she didn't think God's blessing passed the second row. So that was where we sat. Anyone who sat in row 3 didn't love Jesus as much as she did. So that's where it started. So every week I was there at church in the second row, and I just would watch, and the jokes would come, and then I had to get up on stage. Long story short, I did my first memory verse being shy. I never wanted to.
Interesting.
The kids up there to do the memory verse, and I didn't want to do it. And I remember a younger kid did it, and another one did it, and I practiced all week, but then drew a blank, and I could actually hear everyone in church talking. Like, that experience hit me like a rock, almost like as hard as Chris Rock got hit, but it hit me hard, and I finally be able to come funny and be able to be myself, and that's where I am today.
So Jay, let me jump in for a second, because as you talk about the journey and how you experienced laughter and how it was a way for you to communicate to people who didn't know what to even say to you, and people still stumble with that when you go through grief and pain. We say, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," and then let's talk about the Maple Leafs. I mean, that would take anybody down, but that's a whole other subject. Yeah.
No, it's not. It's a serious subject. Like, they can't catch a break. Like, it's just unbelievable, and not even for fun. If you haven't heard it, yesterday, one of the Leafs players, Minor, I believe, he got carjacked in Etobicoke. Wow. His Range Rover got carjacked at gunpoint.
Wow.
I mean, how bad can a day get? A day after you're out of the playoffs and you're driving in your car and get carjacked. It's just, the world we're living in right now is just such a different than what we're used to.
I had missed that one, but wow, I'm glad you brought it to light, because it really helps us to segue into what I want to talk about today. So first of all, just to set things up, you're a bit of a strange comedian. Pause. I'm just going to, okay, what
exactly are we leading to here, Mike?
So,
strange.
And I just thought I'd just let it hang out there. Okay,
I love
complete
it.
the thought, Mike. So you do clean humor, and so much is a little off the cuff, or we know where it's going to go, and people drop certain bombs. Why clean humor, and what kind of pushback do you get from your peers?
It's so funny you say that. I'm gonna start with the second question first. I get no pushback from my peers. They understand that that's my tone, that's my dialect, that's how I perform. I think they would feel it would be awkward if I wasn't clean. And I'm in every arena where everybody performs, so it's not like anyone discriminates against me in regards to comedy. And when I'm on stage, I don't think anybody even realizes until the end, going, "Hey, wait a minute, I like that guy, and he didn't care." It's so funny. I can go places where they can't, but I can go every place that they can go. So I don't get pushback on that. But why clean comedy? To answer your question, Mike, is that it's just really who I am, and I made it an oath to my mom before she passed that I would live up our family name to the fullest and make sure that I represented us well. And I'm not ashamed to let everyone know that I'm God-fearing, who I am and what I represent. And that goes for any other person that's doing whatever they're doing. If they can express themselves to do what they want to do, why can't I express myself to do the same? And it's really been embraced by everyone who sees me. No one gets really worried, because there's some places where I perform and they're like, oh, what's he going to say? I can keep it witty enough, especially after the experiences I've received, to be able to keep it funny and above ground.
Well, Jay, we love your lighthearted take on things, and today we're talking about cancel culture, a subject that is starting to affect all walks of life: actors, musicians, politicians, you name it. And then the Webster Dictionary calls cancel culture the practice of tendency of engaging in mass counseling as a way of expressing disapproval and exerting social pressure. Just what is your experience in your walk of life? Because you're not just a comedian, but you're so involved in so many areas. What is your personal experience with this?
Well, I get to see it on a day-to-day basis here on the morning radio show I'm on at Flow every morning, and we hear things every day. So we talk about it. And the view of cancel culture, just the fact that they've given everyone the ability to be treated like someone who's a journalist. Real journalists go to journalism school, they take writing courses, they know how to express themselves, and they kind of look at things through, you know, a broader view. This cancel culture now just directly says what they want. Whoever says what they want. There's no editing. There's nobody, you know, stopping them from expressing what they believe in. And sometimes they can even build a fake account and say things to the crudest nature and hurt people's feelings. And I think right now what's happening is everyone is doing it for the likes of TikTok and Instagram and to get more likes, to do the things more outrageous. And this is what the problem is, because I believe that some of the things that are being said are just being done to one up the last thing that was done. And that's what's been putting us into trouble. Sometimes we're not ready for what the future holds. You remember hearing that? And we didn't know what's coming, but now we're basically just giving everybody that free reign. And I'm not sure it's all in good favor.
You know, Jay, we're going to be back in just a moment to unpack more of cancel culture and what are the new boundaries that we need to put in place so we know how to have healthy conversations. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Jay Leno. No, Jay Martin.
I love this guy.
The global youth culture. More connected, but never more alone. Always seeking pleasure, but never satisfied. A worldwide suicide epidemic. Sexually broken and confused, raised on pornography, taught there is no absolute truth, only preference. How do we communicate the gospel to these young people who have such a negative view of God? How can we show them the love of Jesus in a language they'll understand? In Steiger, our heart is to bridge the gap between the church and the global youth culture. We do this by raising up missionaries and equipping the local church to proclaim the message of Jesus in a relevant way to culture today. Our vision is to establish 100 city teams by 2025, reaching 1 million global youth every year.
You know, Jay, I've been reading an opinion article in New York Times, and it was very interesting in the fact that this person was talking about the fact that today in society, the way we polarize people and the way we make people wrong on both sides of the spectrum is we try to make people moral monsters. And when we do that, we take the way... we make ourselves prideful. We take away the art of being humble, the humility, and the fact that none of us is perfect. And there is a slight chance that maybe we don't have all the facts on something. So what is your opinion on that?
It's so true. It's so true, because when you see something happen, you don't even know who's right or who's wrong, especially with what happened with Will Smith and Chris Rock. When it happened, they were like, who's right, who's wrong? Whose side are you? And no one was taking the human side, that this gentleman was assaulted on national television, and it would be a part of his life for as long as he lived.
Okay, I'm going to confess something, and then I want you to complete the thought. Okay, I didn't watch it. I only heard about it the next day. And when I heard about it, I said, yeah, somebody's standing up for their wife. And that was how it shifted my thoughts. And then I hear you get the rest of the picture, and I find him changing again. So I'm just confessing how it's so easy to be manipulated. Back to you, Jay.
Oh, I was the exact same way, and people came like, are you defending the comedian just because he's a comedian and he told a joke? And I'm like, I know Chris Rock's material. I've seen him several times. I've met him. I know his material could be way worse than what he said. And I realized when you go fact checking that Will was laughing at the jokes as well, until he realized it was something that hurt his wife. And they had some other things that were going on off the record. But what they all did wrong, I believe, is they brought their all personal life, their internal feelings into a public forum for people to have to decide who was right or wrong. And that's where the humility part, I echo with what you say, Julie, is lost. Because he just walked up and like assaulted him and then came back and threatened him. If he had threatened him to me before the assault and it continued, that's to me a whole different ballpark. But to do that, especially on a night, which was your night, it was just to me wrong. And I think what's happened is the human side, because this is what we read. He knew that by slapping him, this would be the be all and end all. As he walked up there and braced himself to do that, the be all and end all. If this was two people chatting over the phone, it wouldn't have gotten that deep. And I think that's where you're so right. I got to echo that, Julie, that human side is often lost in this new cancel culture.
Okay, so talk to me about this though, Jay, because we can blow up the Will Smith thing and we can take all sides and have opinions, et cetera. I think it'd be very interesting to talk about, we don't have time, his confession, his apology. Is it sincere? Is it legit? Why does he have to be sidelined for 10 years? And all of that. But where does it come back to us as individuals?
Right.
Where are we allowed to have an opinion and express it today? Because nowadays, when I think of cancel culture, it almost seems like I'm afraid to speak my mind for afraid I'm going to get disliked on Facebook. Everyone's going to turn against me. What about legitimate things that I might disagree with? How do we express it? And do we even have a forum right now?
Right now, it's difficult to say because anyone who has authority to speak to a group of people is unfortunately forced into having to make a decision regarding cancel culture. And it's sad, but that's what's going on. And if you want to be someone who's continuously heard, you unfortunately have to be that person that makes that decision so people know what side of the fence you're on. No longer is the time for you to sit in the middle of the fence and not have a pro or against. You have to have an opinion, which again brings us to being self-worth, having a grounding and a foundation within yourself that knows that whatever you let out is going to be fair and just to people's sights. And I think that happens with you, Mike. I think when you are speaking to a congregation, you know there's things you believe in and things you don't, but you've had ability over time and learned the cadence to use when speaking to a crowd of people. A lot of these people right now that are on social media don't have that. And therein lies the problem. And therein lies the lack of humility to be able to speak to people on your opinion. I could express my opinion when I'm speaking for or against a subject, but I know how far to take it where I'm not actually hurting someone or directly for their personal feelings and objectivity.
It seems like we want compliance with the correct view, but that is driven by fear, I think.
It is, especially now.
Yeah.
And I think the fact, too, that we think we're right, and if we forget the fact that if we want to live in a democracy, and if we take it from a Christian perspective, then we have to see everyone's made in the image of God. And then we have to take it to step 2. None of us is perfect. So
Not at all.
If we keep those things in mind, it should really affect how we engage with one another and allow that respect and allow other voices and opinions to be shared. At least that's my view.
Oh, I love your view. And I'd like to wrap up with that view as well. The shirt that I'm wearing right now, I'm going to draw attention to that. A professional risk taker. And that may view people in a way of negativity because this guy takes risks. But I'm saying, why do all the risks have to be negative? I take positive risks. I take chances on people that don't necessarily have the opportunity for people to take chances on them because someone took a chance on me. Jesus took a chance on me. God took a chance on me and curved me in a way that was different. There was no one for me to model my career after, but look at what's happened with it. Amazing opportunities are there, allowing me to continue to take risks in the unknown. I wasn't in TV and television, but yet I'm writing a sitcom. I wasn't in movies, but yet I've wrote a movie. And both of them are getting picked up and looked at in this year. And this is the part that I say, I want to be a professional risk taker. I want to be the first one who sets the examples for people like me, God-fearing, men of God that have true beliefs and don't have to stay in that safe zone of each and every weekend going to church and doing the same thing, that there's nothing wrong with that. However, why not be a risk taker to have the opportunity to enjoy the life that we're living, which is very short, might I add. And one thing that canceled culture does know is life is short, even for you guys. That's why they're trying to make that big move in short periods of time.
I think one of the challenges is that with cancel culture, it wants to put you in the penalty box for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And how do we get out? How do we get out? And so I come back to the teachings of Jesus. You know, the thief on the cross, the woman caught in adultery, someone like me. And he said, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old is past, the new has come. There can be a new beginning when we have faith in Jesus. Last question, or maybe Julie's going to jump in, but how do you think the church needs to be responding today in the midst of this cancel culture environment?
You know what? I think this obviously gives the chance of a lifetime for a youth pastor. Do you know that? Because we sit back and we hear a youth pastor. What does everyone think automatically? That's like the third trumpet player. Like that's the one we don't really listen to. Unless it's a picnic or we're going out, that's when we listen to the youth pastor. I think we give forums to that youth pastor to have the ability to talk and coach the youth of the church and let them know what they're thinking. I think those forums publicly in your church, even if you had like a Zoom meeting where you can ask the youth pastor some very difficult questions and have that pastor be able to have guidance from a senior pastor to give them guidance. But that lets you know a little bit more what's happening. Sometimes the youth of today aren't comfortable speaking with the head pastor because it's too extreme. That's like the Supreme Court. But sometimes you can tell somebody out in the little community courts, you know what I mean? Some all-claim courts, yeah. And let that junior judge have the opportunity to give you some ways. I think that would be the best advice to help deal with it at an early level. Because I think you're a little ahead of your bridges there, Mike. You can't solve those problems yet. You're not recruited yet.
Well, I'm going to have you come down to our church and we'll have kangaroo court. Okay? How about that? We'll just do it together. Julie,
I love it.
Say something that makes sense for us.
I love the fact that you're a risk taker, that somebody who can have a little dirt or dust on them and you see through that and you see potential, and that's how God looks at us, and I think that's fantastic. As always, it's a pleasure to have you with us, Jay. Keep on doing everything that you're doing. It's a major impact for so far, and we have to have you back again. So thank you for being with us today.
Before I go, I'd just like to say, Mike, we could solve this problem here and now. So I want to have you have a safe home game. So invite me to your church where the fans are apparently your fans, and let me open up for you and let's see how it works out.
There we go.
I'll see you Sunday.
All right, Shalaj accepted.
All right.
Thank you so much, Jay.
God can lead you just as clearly to act or to wait. Both require faith, perseverance, and trust.
Learning how to wait for God is just as important as doing great exploits for Him. It can be just as difficult, even more difficult, because of our impatient nature.
If you want to be a faithful Christian, you have to be prepared to obey whether the task is exciting or frustrating.
So how do we make sense of this term, cancel culture? What does the Bible say? And should that even concern us? How do we deal with people who have been canceled, who have apologized sincerely, who have asked for forgiveness? How do we restore them? And how do we look at this? Well, those are some of the questions we're going to try to get to in the next couple minutes. But just work with me as we back up and realize some of the realities that people are dealing with today. You know, as I said earlier, that the canceling is often performed on social media in the form of group shaming. Whether it's Will Smith or whoever, they're canceled. And to be canceled, it's like the group decides you are bad forever. Now, there's a difference. There's call-out culture and there's cancel culture. A lot of times they get confused. Sometimes they go together. They're used interchangeably, but there is a difference. You see, call-out culture is about calling attention to someone's wrongdoing and then giving them a chance to learn from that and to grow and to apologize and to change. And I get that. I believe that we need to call out people. I've been called out and saying, hey, what you're doing or what you're saying, that's not right. That's not appropriate. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. But cancel culture doesn't give that opportunity. And instead, it immediately labels them as bad, whether they deserve it or not. And then we get the whole group, the group shaming, that jumps on board. Now, some of the top reasons for canceling include these reasons. Some of them are good. Some of them you need to ponder. We say, well, we need to encourage cancel culture because it serves as a teaching moment. I'm going to make an example out of somebody and we're going to embarrass them, but everybody else, you take notice. Then we also do it because we want someone to consider the consequences of their statements. And sometimes canceling happens to expose racism or sexism. And people will reference the hashtag #MeToo movement, the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And that is where some canceling comes into play. Whether you agree or not, that's just the reality. And then we say canceling is good because it gets people to think before they speak, or finally to hold people accountable for their statements or behaviors. So what happens? Well, a lot of times there is huge paranoia with people right now saying, is my past going to come back to bite me? Am I going to be haunted by the things that I have done? And what we're finding is that canceling is wreaking havoc on onlookers' mental health. And some bystanders are plagued with fear. They become overwhelmed with anxiety that people will turn on them if they fully express themselves, saying, I've got this opinion, but I'm afraid to share it because the group will turn against me. And then, of course, as we've said, that people will use the past against us. One of the interesting things with social media and teenagers is that cancellation is the worst punishment imaginable because rejection by their peer group is their biggest fear. And that's why there's a huge link right now between cancel culture and mental health, because being canceled can lead to teen anxiety, depression, trauma, suicidal thoughts, and wrong behavior. I think that also is true for adults as well. But in the church, how do we handle that? How do we handle people that have been canceled? And do you speak up if you disagree? Many times people are judged very quickly, and media wants to cancel somebody, and yet they're speaking an opinion that could be very justifiable. It could be true. And sometimes they deserve it. They deserve to be canceled, to say, hey, what you're saying is wrong. I want us to think for a moment, though, what do you do with the person who perhaps call-out culture would have been more appropriate? And they said, you know, what I've done is wrong. Will you forgive me? Is there a way back? Cancel culture says there's no way back. You're there forever. That's not the heart of the gospel. Because if it was, all of us would be qualifying for cancel culture. My sins would have been too much. They would have been overwhelming. And if we could take our sins and put them up on a whiteboard for everyone to see, every one of us would be canceled. I'm not excusing wrongdoing. I'm not excusing evil. But what I am saying is we have a Savior who loves us. And there are reasons why when people come saying, will you forgive me? We need to forgive. Because Jesus has forgiven us. That's why the Bible says, be gentle and ready to forgive and never hold grudges. Remember the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive other people. We see something with God and His grace that is far beyond us. I need to forgive because God forgives me. Resentment doesn't work, and I will need forgiveness in the future. And so as we ponder that, and as we think about this term, cancel culture, let's pause for a moment. And before we go along with the crowd and jump on the bandwagon, ask ourselves, do I need to speak up, even at the risk of people turning against me? Because Jesus is there to defend us, to call us to a higher standard. And if any of you have blown, if any of you have failed, I want you to know today that there is forgiveness, that we have a Redeemer who loves us and says, you can become a new creation. The world might want to remind you of your past, but God says, I rip it up, I put it in the sea of forgetfulness, and today you can have a new beginning. And that's what I hold on to as I think of Christ being my Redeemer, as I think of the hope of the gospel. Let's hold things in balance, and let's remember to listen twice as much before we speak words that invite people to either live or die.
This topic of cancel culture is not easy to embrace and get your head around. I know for me it isn't, but I was thinking about the fact that, you know, if we're canceled, I'm definitely canceled because there isn't a human being on this planet that's lived a perfect life. But I'm so thankful that we don't have to worry because we have a God who never cancels us and gives us second chances. So if you're thinking it's over for you no matter what you've done, it's not. God's there and He's waiting for you. And there are second and third and fourth chances.